Harold Jenkins woke up early that morning. Today was a special day. After working hard for 50 years and saving his money, he was finally going to buy his dream car. Harold was 75 years old with gray hair and kind eyes. His hands were rough from years of hard work, but his smile was warm and friendly. Harold got dressed in his best clothes: clean pants, a button-up shirt, and his favorite hat. They weren't fancy or new, but they were neat and clean. He looked at himself in the mirror and nodded with satisfaction. Then he picked up his walking cane and headed out the door. The bus dropped Harold off 2 blocks from Luxury Motors, the fanciest car dealership in town. He walked slowly but with purpose. Through the large glass windows, he could see shiny new cars inside. Cars that most people in his neighborhood could only dream about. Today, Harold thought to himself, one of those beauties is coming home with me. As he pushed open the heavy glass door, cold air hit his face. The showroom was bright and clean. The cars looked even more beautiful up close: red ones, blue ones, black ones, all gleaming under the lights. Harold felt like a kid again, excited and full of wonder. For 50 years, Harold had worked in construction. He started as a simple worker and ended up owning his own small company. He had built houses, offices, and schools all over the city. His company wasn't big, but it was successful. Harold had been smart with his money. He saved, he invested, and now he had enough to buy any car in the showroom without worry. Harold walked slowly around the showroom. He stopped at a sleek blue sports car. It was perfect, the exact model and color he had dreamed about for years. He reached out his hand to touch the shiny door handle. "Sir, please don't touch the merchandise." A young salesman in an expensive suit rushed over. His face showed annoyance. He looked Harold up and down, taking in his simple clothes and old cane. "These cars are very expensive," the salesman said in a voice that suggested Harold couldn't possibly afford one. Harold smiled politely. "I know. I'm interested in buying this blue one. Can you tell me more about it?" The salesman raised his eyebrows. He didn't try to hide his doubt. "This model starts at $85,000, sir. Perhaps you'd like to check our used car lot down the street. They have more affordable options." Harold kept his smile, though it was harder now. "I'd still like to test drive this one, please." The salesman looked uncomfortable. He glanced toward his manager, who was watching from across the room. The manager walked over, his fake smile not reaching his eyes. "Is there a problem here, Tom?" the manager asked the salesman. "This gentleman wants to test drive the GT 500, Tom said, emphasizing gentleman in a way that suggested Harold was anything but. The manager looked at Harold. His eyes were cold. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're actually closing soon for a private event. Perhaps you could come back another time." Harold knew what was happening. It wasn't the first time people had judged him by his looks or his skin color. He had faced this kind of treatment his whole life. "What time do you open tomorrow?" Harold asked calmly. 10 o'clock, the manager said, clearly relieved Harold wasn't going to make a scene. "But our salespeople are very busy. You should make an appointment." Harold nodded. "I'll be back tomorrow then. No appointment needed. I think you'll want to see me." With dignity, Harold turned and walked out of the showroom. The manager and salesman exchanged looks and smirks behind his back. They had no idea who Harold Jenkins really was. But tomorrow, they would learn a valuable lesson. Harold walked slowly to the bus stop, his cane tapping on the sidewalk with each step. He was not angry, but he was hurt. In his long life, he had seen this kind of treatment many times. But that didn't make it sting any less. On the bus ride home, Harold thought about his father. James Jenkins had been a wise man who taught Harold 2 important things: to work hard and to stand up for himself, but always with dignity. When they push you down because of your color, his father used to say, don't stay down and don't fight back with fists. Get up and show them who you really are. That's the best way to change minds. Harold smiled at the memory. His father would have known exactly what to do in this situation. When Harold got home, he made himself a cup of tea and sat in his favorite chair. His house was small but comfortable. The walls were covered with photos of his family and his life. There was Harold as a young man in his work clothes. There he was with his wife, Mary, who had passed away 5 years ago. There were photos of his 2 children, now grown with families of their own. And there, in the center, was a photo of his father standing proudly in front of the first house he ever built. Harold picked up his phone and called his old friend, Robert Wilson. Robert was a lawyer who had helped Harold with his business for 30 years. "Robert," Harold said when his friend answered, "I need your help with something important. Can you come over tonight?" 2 hours later, Robert sat across from Harold at the kitchen table. Harold told him about what happened at the car dealership. Robert shook his head. "That's not right, Harold. We could sue them for discrimination." Harold smiled. "I have a better idea. Do you remember that news story last month about luxury motors being up for sale?" Robert nodded slowly, starting to understand. "Yes, the owner, Richard Thompson, wants to retire, but no one has bought it yet." "Call him," Harold said. "Tell him I want to meet tomorrow morning. I'm interested in buying." Robert looked surprised. "The whole dealership? Harold, that's a big move. Are you sure?" Harold's eyes twinkled. "I've been saving and investing for 50 years, Robert. My construction company did well. Mary and I lived simply. The kids are taken care of. I have more than enough money. And I think it's time to teach some young people a lesson about judging books by their covers." Robert laughed and shook his head. "Harold Jenkins, you never cease to amaze me. I'll make the call." The next morning, Harold sat across from Richard Thompson in a meeting room at Robert's law office. Richard was a man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. "Mr. Jenkins," Richard said, "I've heard good things about you from Robert. But I must say, I'm surprised. Why would you want to buy a car dealership at your age?" Harold smiled. "Let's just say I had an interesting experience at your showroom yesterday, and I saw room for improvement." Richard looked embarrassed. "I apologize if my staff was rude. Good help is hard to find these days." "No need to apologize," Harold said. "I'm not looking to fire anyone. I want to teach them. Change happens through education, not punishment." By noon, the papers were signed. Harold Jenkins was now the owner of Luxury Motors. He paid a fair price that barely made a dent in his savings. "What will you do first?" Robert asked as they left the office. Harold checked his watch. It was almost 3 o'clock. "I think it's time to introduce myself to my new employees," he said with a smile. "And I still want that blue car." At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Harold returned to Luxury Motors. This time, he didn't wear his everyday clothes. He put on a nice dark blue suit that he kept for special occasions. Robert walked beside him, carrying a briefcase. Richard Thompson, the former owner, followed behind them. When Harold walked through the glass doors of the showroom, nobody recognized him at first. The place was busy with salespeople talking to customers. The manager, whose name was Bill, was at his desk in the corner. Tom, the rude salesman from yesterday, was showing a car to a couple. Richard called out, "May I have everyone's attention, please?" The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to the 3 men standing by the door. "I'd like to make an announcement," Richard said. "As of today, I am no longer the owner of Luxury Motors." Whispers spread across the room. The staff looked worried. New owners often meant new rules, new managers, and sometimes job losses. Richard continued, "I'd like to introduce you to the new owner, Mr. Harold Jenkins." Harold stepped forward, leaning slightly on his cane. He smiled at the shocked faces around the room. Bill, the manager, turned pale. Tom, who had just noticed Harold, froze in place. "Thank you, Richard," Harold said. His voice was calm and clear. "I'm happy to meet all of you. I look forward to working with each one of you in the days ahead." Bill rushed over, his face a mix of fear and surprise. Mr. Jenkins, welcome to Luxury Motors, he stammered. Harold looked the manager in the eyes. Thank you, Bill. I believe we met yesterday, though you were too busy planning a private event to really talk to me. Bill's face turned red. Mr. Jenkins, I want to apologize for. Harold held up his hand. No need for that now. We have work to do. He turned to address the whole room. I want everyone to gather in the meeting room in 5 minutes. We need to talk about some changes. 5 minutes later, all 20 employees sat in the dealership's meeting room. Harold stood at the front with Robert beside him. First, Harold said, I want you all to know that no one is losing their job today. Relief washed over many faces in the room. But, Harold continued, things will change around here. Yesterday, I came to this showroom as a customer. I was looking to buy that blue GT 500. He pointed through the window to the car on the showroom floor. Instead, I was treated like I didn't belong here, like I couldn't possibly afford such a nice car. Tom looked down at the floor, unable to meet Harold's eyes. You judged me by how I looked, by my old clothes, my cane, maybe even by the color of my skin. You decided I wasn't worth your time. The room was completely silent now. My father taught me something important, Harold said. He taught me that when people judge you wrongly, you have two choices. You can get angry, or you can show them they're wrong. I choose the second path. Harold walked slowly around the room, looking at each person. From today, this dealership will have one main rule. We treat every single person who walks through those doors with respect. We don't judge people by how they look. We don't decide who can and can't afford our cars. We treat everyone with the same good service. Is that clear? Heads nodded around the room. Good, Harold said. Now, Tom, I believe you were going to show me the GT 500 yesterday. I'm still interested in a test drive. Tom stood up, his face red with shame. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. As they walked out of the meeting room, Harold placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. And after that, Harold said quietly, you and I need to have a longer talk. I think you have potential, but you need to learn some important lessons. Tom's hand shook as he got the keys to the blue GT 500. He couldn't believe that the old man he had been so rude to yesterday was now his boss. And not only his boss, but the owner of the entire dealership. How could he have been so wrong about Harold Jenkins? The car is ready for your test drive, Mr. Jenkins, Tom said, his voice quiet and nervous. Harold smiled. Thank you, Tom. And please, call me Harold. He took the keys from Tom's hand. Will you join me? I think we have some things to talk about. Tom nodded, too ashamed to speak. They walked out to the car together. Harold ran his hand over the smooth blue paint before getting into the driver's seat. Tom sat in the passenger seat, looking straight ahead. As they drove away from the dealership, Harold enjoyed the power of the car. It handled beautifully, just as he had imagined it would. But he was more interested in the young man sitting next to him. How long have you worked at Luxury Motors, Tom? Harold asked. 3 years, sir. Tom replied. It's my first job out of college. Harold nodded. And who taught you to judge customers by how they look? Tom's face turned red again. No one taught me that, sir. I don't know why I did it. I guess I thought that people who can afford expensive cars look a certain way. And how do they look? Harold asked. Tom struggled to find words. Well, you know, they wear expensive clothes, fancy watches. They look rich. Harold chuckled. I was a construction worker for most of my life, Tom. I started with nothing and built my company from the ground up. I never saw the need for fancy clothes or watches. To me, those things aren't important. He turned down a side street, heading toward an older part of town. I want to show you something, Harold said. 20 minutes later, they pulled up in front of a large building site. Workers in hard hats moved around, and the frame of a new building was taking shape. See that? Harold pointed. That's the new community center I'm funding. It will have a library, a job training center, and a daycare for working parents. It costs more than 20 of those blue cars. Tom stared at the construction site, then back at Harold. I didn't judge you by your clothes yesterday, Harold continued. I judged you by how you treated me. And today, I'm not judging you by that mistake, but by your potential to learn from it. Tom looked down at his hands. I'm really sorry, Mr. Jenkins. I mean Harold. I was wrong. And I'm grateful you didn't fire me. Harold smiled. Firing you wouldn't teach you anything, Tom, but I think working at my dealership under new rules might. As they drove back, Harold explained his plans for the dealership. We're going to start a program for young people from poor neighborhoods. They'll learn about cars, about business, about customer service. Some of them might become salespeople one day. Others might become mechanics or managers. Tom listened, surprised by Harold's vision. And you, Tom, Harold said, if you're willing to learn and change, I'd like you to help me with this program. Me? Tom was shocked. Why would you trust me with that after how I treated you? Harold pulled the car back into the dealership lot. Because everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes the people who have made mistakes are the best teachers, once they've learned their lesson. He stopped the car and turned to Tom. So, what do you say? Are you ready to learn and teach others? Tom nodded, feeling a new respect for the old man beside him. Yes, sir. I'm ready to learn. Harold smiled. Good. Now let's go back inside. I still need to sign the papers for this car. I've waited 50 years to own it, and I'm not waiting another day. 1 month had passed since Harold became the owner of Luxury Motors. The dealership looked the same from the outside, but inside, many things had changed. Harold had put up a new sign near the entrance that read, "Everyone who enters here deserves respect." Harold sat in his new office, looking through the glass walls of the showroom floor. He watched as Bill, the manager, greeted an elderly woman who had just walked in. Before, Bill might have ignored her. Now he smiled and offered her coffee, showing her the same respect he would show anyone else. Harold smiled. His lessons were working. There was a knock on his door. It was Tom. Harold, the first group of students is here, Tom said. Harold stood up, leaning on his cane. Excellent. Let's go meet them. They walked to the back of the dealership where a special room had been set up with chairs, a whiteboard and tools for learning about cars. 10 young people, aged 16 to 20, sat waiting. They were from the poorest parts of the city. Most of them had never been in a place like Luxury Motors before. Good morning, everyone, Harold said as he entered the room. Welcome to the first day of our youth auto training program. The young people looked nervous. One boy raised his hand. Yes, Harold said. Sir, are we really going to learn about these fancy cars? And maybe even drive them? The boy asked. Harold smiled. You're going to learn about every car in this showroom. You'll learn how they work, how to fix them, how to sell them, and yes, eventually, you'll drive them too. The excitement in the room grew. These young people never thought they would get chances like this. But first, Harold continued, you're going to learn something even more important than cars. You're going to learn about respect, hard work, and judging people by their character, not by how they look. Harold introduced Tom as their main teacher. Tom stepped forward, looking more confident than he had a month ago. A month ago, Tom said, I made a big mistake. I judged someone because of how they looked. I thought because Mr. Jenkins was an older black man in simple clothes, he couldn't afford our cars. I was very wrong. Tom looked at Harold with respect. That man is now my boss and the owner of this dealership, and he taught me that you should never judge people by how they look or where they come from. The young people listened carefully. They knew about being judged unfairly. It had happened to many of them. That's the first lesson we want to teach you, Harold said. And once you learn it, you can help teach others. That's how we change the world, one person at a time. After the class began, Harold went back to his office. His phone rang. It was his daughter, Lisa. "Dad, how's the dealership going?" she asked. "It's going well," Harold said. "Very well indeed." "Are you still keeping that manager and salesman who were so rude to you?" Lisa asked. She had been angry when Harold told her what happened. "Yes, and Tom is now teaching our youth program," Harold said. Lisa sighed. "Dad, you're too nice. I would have fired them both." Harold laughed. "Firing them wouldn't teach them anything. This way they learn. And they help others learn too." "You sound happy, Dad," Lisa said. "I am," Harold replied. "You know, I went there to buy a car, but I ended up with something much better. I found a way to make a difference." After the call, Harold walked back to the classroom. He stood in the doorway, watching as Tom showed the young people how an engine worked. Their eyes were full of interest and hope. Harold thought about his father and how proud he would be. This was better than any revenge. This was creating real change. And it all started because someone thought he didn't belong in a car showroom. 3 months had passed. Harold's blue GT 500 sat in his garage most days. He preferred to drive his old car to the dealership. It reminded him of where he came from and helped him stay humble. One morning, Harold arrived at Luxury Motors earlier than usual. He wanted some quiet time to think about the next steps for his business. But when he pulled into the parking lot, he saw another car already there. It was Tom's car. Harold found Tom in the training room, preparing for the day's lesson with the youth program. "You're here early," Harold said. Tom looked up, surprised. "Oh, good morning, Harold." "Yes, I wanted to get ready for today. We're teaching the students about sales today." Harold smiled. He saw how much Tom had changed. The young man who once looked down on customers now spent extra time helping young people learn. "Mind if I sit in on your class today?" Harold asked. "Not at all," Tom replied. "The students always like when you visit." Later that morning, the training room was full. The 10 young people from the first class were still in the program. They had learned a lot over the past months. Tom stood at the front of the room. "Today we're going to talk about being a good salesperson," he said. "And the most important part of that job is respect." The students called out together. Tom nodded. "That's right. Respect. Treating every customer like they matter." One girl raised her hand. Her name was Keisha, and she was one of the brightest students. "Yes, Keisha," Tom said. "But what if someone comes in and they don't look like they can afford a fancy car?" she asked. "Isn't it a waste of time to help them?" Before Tom could answer, the door opened. A man walked in. He wore dirty work clothes and boots. His hands were rough, and his face was tired. The students turned to look at him. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the man said. "I'm looking for Harold Jenkins." Harold stood up from his seat at the back of the room. "That's me. Can I help you?" The man walked over to Harold and held out his hand. "My name is Michael Turner. You don't know me, but you built my parents' house 30 years ago." Harold shook the man's hand, thinking back. "Turner, yes, I remember. Good people. How are they?" "They passed away last year," Michael said. "But they always talked about how you were the best builder they ever met. How you treated them with respect when other builders wouldn't." Harold nodded sadly. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your parents were good people." Michael continued, "I'm a builder too now. My company is doing well, and I want to buy new trucks for my team. 10 of them. I heard you own this place now, and I wanted to give my business to someone I respect." The room was quiet. The students watched with wide eyes. Here was a man in work clothes talking about buying 10 trucks. Harold turned to the students. "This is a perfect example of what we've been teaching you. Mr. Turner here might not look like what you think a wealthy customer looks like, but he runs a successful business and wants to buy 10 vehicles." He put his hand on Tom's shoulder. "I think this would be a good time for a real-life lesson. Tom, why don't you and Keisha help Mr. Turner with his purchase? The rest of the class can observe how a good sale works." Tom nodded, understanding the lesson. We'd be happy to help you, Mr. Turner. Keisha, would you like to help me show Mr. Turner our truck selection? Keisha stood up, looking nervous but excited. Yes, sir. I'd be honored. As they walked out to the showroom, Harold watched with pride. The lesson he was teaching went beyond cars and sales. It was about changing how people see each other, one person at a time. 6 months had passed since Harold became the owner of Luxury Motors. The dealership had changed in many ways. Sales were up. The staff was happier. And the youth auto training program was a big success. One sunny morning, Harold sat in his office reading the local newspaper. There was a knock on his door. It was Bill, the manager who had asked Harold to leave the showroom on that first day. Harold, there's someone here to see you, Bill said. A reporter from the City Times newspaper. Harold looked up from his paper. A reporter. Did they say what they want? They heard about our youth program and want to write a story about it, Bill explained. Harold thought for a moment. He didn't like being in the spotlight. But a story about the program might help more young people learn about it. All right, send them in, Harold said. A young woman walked into the office. She had a notebook and a camera. Mr. Jenkins, I'm Sarah Chen from the City Times, she said, offering her hand. Harold shook her hand. Nice to meet you, Ms. Chen. Please, have a seat. Sarah sat down and took out her notebook. Thank you for seeing me. I've heard wonderful things about your youth auto training program. Harold smiled. It's been a team effort. Everyone here has helped make it work. Can you tell me how it started? Sarah asked. Harold looked out his office window at the showroom floor. Tom was showing a car to an elderly couple. Keisha was helping another customer. 3 other students from the program were now working part-time at the dealership. It started with a lesson about respect, Harold said. He told Sarah about his first visit to the dealership, how he was judged by his appearance, and how he decided to buy the place instead of just getting angry. Sarah wrote quickly in her notebook. That's an amazing story, Mr. Jenkins. Most people would have just complained or left a bad review. You turned it into something positive. Harold chuckled. My father taught me that the best way to change things is to become the person who can make that change happen. Just then, there was another knock on the door. It was Tom with Michael Turner, the builder who had bought 10 trucks for his company. Sorry to interrupt, Tom said, but Mr. Turner is here to pick up the last of his trucks, and he wanted to say hello. Michael stepped forward. Harold, I just wanted to thank you. The trucks are perfect for my business, and I wanted to tell you that I've recommended your dealership to 3 other business owners. They'll be coming by next week. Harold stood up and shook Michael's hand. Thank you, Michael. We appreciate your business and your recommendations. After Michael and Tom left, Sarah looked at Harold with interest. Is that normal? Getting such big sales and recommendations? Harold nodded. It is now. When you treat people with respect, they notice. They come back. They tell others. The interview continued for another hour. Harold showed Sarah around the dealership and introduced her to the students in the youth program. At the end of the tour, they stood looking at the blue GT 500, Harold's dream car. One last question, Mr. Jenkins, Sarah said. What do you hope people will learn from your story? Harold thought for a moment. I hope they learn that how you respond to disrespect matters. You can get angry, or you can create change. I chose to create change. Sarah closed her notebook. Thank you for your time, Mr. Jenkins. Your story will inspire many people. After Sarah left, Harold walked around his dealership. He watched his employees working, the students learning, and the customers being treated with respect. He thought about how one bad day had turned into something so good. His father would be proud. Harold had not just bought his dream car. He had created his dream of a place where everyone was valued. 1 week after the newspaper interview, Harold arrived at the dealership to find a line of people waiting outside. The doors wouldn't open for another hour, but at least 20 people stood there, talking and drinking coffee. Harold parked his car and walked over to them. "Good morning," he said. "Are you all here for the dealership?" A woman stepped forward. "Yes, we are. We read about you and your program in the City Times." The story was on the front page of Sunday's paper. Harold was surprised. He hadn't expected the story to be so big. "Well, we open at 9. You're welcome to wait in our coffee area inside." He unlocked the doors early and welcomed everyone in. Bill and Tom arrived soon after, shocked to see so many people waiting. "What's going on?" Bill asked. Harold showed him the newspaper he had picked up from one of the visitors. There on the front page was a large photo of Harold with the youth program students. The headline read, "From rejected customer to respected owner. How one man's response to discrimination changed lives." The phones had been ringing all morning, too. The receptionist told them, "People want to know about the youth program, about jobs, and about buying cars." By lunchtime, the dealership had sold 5 cars. 3 more people had applied to work there. And 15 young people had asked about joining the next youth program class. In his office, Harold got a special visitor. The mayor of the city walked in with 2 of her staff. "Mr. Jenkins," the mayor said, shaking his hand, "I read the story about what you've done here. It's exactly the kind of positive change our city needs." Harold thanked her for coming. "It's a small thing, really. Just trying to teach some important lessons." The mayor shook her head. "It's not small at all. You've created jobs, taught young people valuable skills, and shown everyone the power of respect. The city council wants to help your program grow." She explained that the city wanted to partner with Luxury Motors. They would provide money to help more young people join the program. They would also help graduates find jobs at other businesses. "Your program could be a model for the whole city," the mayor said. "Would you consider expanding it?" Harold thought about it. He had only wanted to teach a lesson to the people who had disrespected him. But now this small lesson had grown into something much bigger. "I would be honored," Harold said. That evening, after everyone had left, Harold sat alone in his office. He looked at the newspaper article again. There was a quote from Tom that touched his heart. "Mr. Jenkins could have fired me for how I treated him. Instead, he taught me to be a better person. He changed my life." There was also a quote from Keisha, now working part-time at the dealership. "Before this program, I never thought I belonged in a place like this. Mr. Jenkins showed me that I belong anywhere I want to be." Harold's phone rang. It was his son, James. "Dad, I just saw the newspaper," James said. "The whole family is so proud of you." Harold smiled. "I just did what my father would have done, what your grandfather taught me." "I know," James said. "Grandpa always said that when people push you down, get up and show them who you really are." "That's right," Harold said softly. "And sometimes, when you show them who you really are, you remind them who they can be." After the call, Harold walked through the empty showroom. He stopped at the blue GT 500, his dream car. He had finally bought it, but he had gained something far more valuable, the chance to create real change in people's lives. And it all started because someone thought he didn't belong. 1 year had passed since Harold Jenkins first walked into Luxury Motors and was asked to leave. So much had changed since that day. On a bright Saturday morning, Harold stood on a small stage set up in the dealership parking lot. A crowd of over 200 people gathered in front of him. There were students from the youth program, staff from the dealership, city officials, and many community members. Today was the grand opening of the Jenkins Automotive Training Center, a new building next to the dealership. The city had helped fund it, along with money from Harold and donations from local businesses. Harold looked out at the crowd. In the front rows sat his family, his son James, his daughter Lisa, and his grandchildren. Next to them were Tom, Keisha, and the other students from the first youth class, all now employed either at Luxury Motors or other businesses in the city. 1 year ago, Harold began, I walked into this dealership to buy a car. I was judged by how I looked, not by who I was. I was asked to leave. The crowd was quiet, listening to every word. I could have gotten angry. I could have complained. I could have given up. But my father taught me something important. When people push you down because of how you look, don't stay down. Get up and show them who you really are. Harold looked at Tom, who nodded with a smile. So I bought the dealership, Harold continued. Not to get revenge, but to create change. To teach a lesson about respect and dignity. He pointed to the new building behind him. And now, that small lesson has grown into this, a place where hundreds of young people will learn skills, find jobs, and most importantly, learn to judge others by their character, not by how they look. The mayor stepped forward and handed Harold a large pair of scissors to cut the ribbon across the training center's doors. Before I cut this ribbon, Harold said, I want to thank someone who isn't here today. My father, James Jenkins Sr. He faced much worse discrimination than I ever did. But he never let it make him bitter. Instead, he taught me to respond to disrespect with dignity and action. Harold cut the ribbon, and the crowd cheered. People began touring the new training center with its classrooms, workshops, and computer lab. Later, as the celebration continued, Harold stood to the side with Tom, watching people explore the new building. Did you ever imagine it would grow this big? Tom asked. Harold shook his head. Never. I just wanted to teach you and Bill a lesson. Tom laughed. Well, we learned it, and now we're teaching others. A young woman approached them. She was well dressed in a business suit with a confident smile. Mr. Jenkins, I'm Alicia Washington from Capital Investments. Our company has been watching what you've done here. We'd like to talk to you about funding similar programs in other cities. Harold's eyes widened. Other cities. Alicia nodded. What you've built here could help young people across the country. Would you be interested in meeting with our board next week? After she left, Tom looked at Harold with amazement. Nationwide. Harold, do you know what this means? Harold nodded slowly, thinking about how far things had come. It means that what my father taught me will now help even more people. That evening, Harold drove his blue GT 500 home. The car was everything he had dreamed it would be. Fast, beautiful, powerful. But it was no longer the most important thing he had gained. As he parked in his driveway, Harold looked up at the stars. Thank you, Dad, he whispered. Your lessons changed my life. And now they're changing many more. What had started as a moment of disrespect had become a movement of respect. Harold Jenkins hadn't just bought a car dealership. He had created a legacy of dignity, opportunity, and change that would live on long after him.